Welcome back to another edition of Where's the Teaspoon? This week we're talking to Warren Gregory, who is a district nurse here in DCHS, and he is also the gay male advocate for DCHS in our LGBTQIA plus staff network. Warren, welcome to Where's the Teaspoon? Thank you for joining us. You're the gay male advocate for DCHS. Can you tell us what does that mean? What does that role involve?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. So I think it's quite an important role in the organisation. And as part of the staff network, we have obviously other parts of the network. So I'm the gay advocate for the organisation, and it's really about, for me personally, about raising awareness about what the organisation does itself, and about having a visual representation to staff members, so they can look on the internet, they can find my face, they can find my contact details, and they can get in touch with me. I've been out as gay for quite some time now, and I think I remember back, when I first came out, which is a while ago, we weren't as visual as we are now, and I think that's really important for people that don't have that confidence, are unsure, or they're facing challenges in their own workplace. I think it just helps people have a focus of somebody to get in touch with. So I'm happy for people to email me, we can chat on the phone, and it's just about guiding people through. It might be about coming out, it might be that they're having difficulties with their line manager, or if they're in a clinical role, it might be something that they want to debrief where they've been subject to homophobic or transphobic abuse. So yeah, for me, I've never been as active in the LGBTQIA network as I have since I joined DCHS.
Yeah, okay. So you are there as a support for people across the organisation, that they can come to you for a listening ear and advice and friendly face.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, other organisations may have something similar. I took part in a quest for some of the GPs as part of this role, as well. So me and Joe, the gay female advocate, for the organisation, we went and spoke to some GPs about inclusivity. I was on a meeting before this podcast about health inequalities, and, as LBG, can't even speak properly, I apologise, LGBTQ plus IA, we suffer health inequalities, and I think, it's important to have that representation within the organisation, that people know that they're not alone, and people may be struggling with sort of an internal homophobia. These are words that we've heard in the last sort of few years, and actually they resonate quite a lot with people that have been out in the community for quite some time. So it's exactly what you say. It's sort of a point of contact, a listening ear, and if things need to be signposted to other people or other services, then obviously I'm able to do that as well.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about your own experience of coming out?
Yeah, see, it's a really good question. Have to dig around in the memoir somewhere. So I came out when I was 19, and I don't like to say it, but I'm be 39.5 in September. So, sort of like 21, 22 years, and it's a very different experience now. I was thinking about this last night when I was looking at stuff, and I remember probably when I was about 14 or 15 thinking, something's not quite right, or I don't seem to like the same things as my peers. What does that mean? And at the time, gay people weren't actually that visible, on, the internet was relatively a new thing, dial-up internet, if people remember that. And I remember watching Queer as Folk, you know, which was groundbreaking at the time on Channel 4, and thinking, oh, actually, I think that might be me. And then, so I have an older brother who's 2 years older than me, and my mum and dad, and I'd started working before I started my nurse training for the first time. That I didn't complete for other reasons, but I was too busy going out getting drunk, to be honest. But that'll come later in the memoir. And it just wasn't the right time for me to do my nurse training. But as part of, before I started my training, I did my A-levels, and then I went and got a job in a care home, and the care home manager was gay, and that was really the first time that I'd ever actually met somebody that was gay, and that was happy and proud, you know. So to me, it was actually a realization that actually, yes, I am gay, but actually still managing to get those words out and coming out was really quite tricky. One of the girls that I went to uni with the first time, and who was a friend, she asked me, and it's the first time that I actually said yes. And then I remember going to uni. I moved out of home, went and lived in the halls at the what was the old DRI at the time, in the nurses' tower, and it waved, because I was scared that if I come out, my parents would kick me out. So, you know, there's a lot, you know, I think about it now, and some of the memories have gone, but actually I was really quite scared. When I went to uni, I sort of reinvented myself, in a sense that people knew I was already gay. I accepted I was gay. So it was like, oh, I'm gay. And people were like, oh, okay then. Where obviously when I was at sixth form, you know, it was all very much, you know, on the down low, as it were. But I did get, you know, really badly bullied at school, and that's probably shaped in who I am now. I won't dwell on that, but you know, it wasn't a great time in my life, but I was lucky because my brother was 2 years older. He was doing his own thing. I had really supportive friends that I'm still friends with now, you know, and the world has changed, but it was a very harrowing time. And I tell people about how I came out. So my dad, who I love to death, used to work down the pit. So he was a miner, salt of the earth, lovely man. But he said to me, when I told him, he just said, "Are you staying for your tea?" And I was like, eh? Have you heard? Yes, I've heard what you've said, and it's not open for discussion. Did you want a drink? No, Dad, I don't want a drink. I'm going to work. And my mum, who passed away a few years ago, I think she knew on some level, but didn't really want to accept it. So I told her, and she said, "Oh, don't worry, it's just a phase. You'll grow out of it, you know. Don't worry, you know." And then we spoke, a few years later, and actually, I think I look back now, and actually, I probably from both of them was probably a bit of ignorance. And actually, I think at the time, you know, we certainly weren't allowed to get married or have a civil partnership. We, as gay people, weren't allowed to adopt children. So I think she was looking at it as though I would probably have quite a lonely life on my own. So yeah, so I was very lucky in the fact that, you know, my parents accepted me. I think it took them a very long time to accept who I am. I think at the beginning there was a lot of tolerance. They continue to love me regardless of what my sexual orientation was, but I think it took them both quite a long time to accept and be happy with that. I remember my mum saying at a family party, "Oh, don't tell people you're gay." I mean, I was a bit like, I think they already know, Mum, but okay. I don't think it's going to be a big surprise, but okay. you know, and stuff, and you know, and we're lucky that, you know, the world has changed in the last 20 odd years, you know.
Yeah.
I hope we get to some point, you know, my little nephews are 12 and 9 now, and I hope we get to a point where people don't have to come out, people are just accepted for who they are, you know, but that's not going to happen in my lifetime. But yeah, so difficult coming out, but you know, I was lucky, and I was, you know, I was told by other peers, you know, that they'd been kicked out, you know, when I first started going to like gay clubs, and when I was like 19 and 20, like some of the stories that I'd heard from my peers, you know, they'd been kicked out of home, they'd had, you know, had to leave university. And so even though my story was difficult, you know, I was lucky that my parents loved me unconditionally. And the fact that I'd got a really good group of friends, and like I say, we're still friends now. So yeah, so difficult, but I've been lucky. Yeah, 100%. And not everybody has that, and you know, and I think that's again why the advocacy role within the organisation is important, because we do have apprentices within the organisation that, you know, maybe 16, 17, 18 that are sort of struggling with these sort of feelings, and where do we go from that? So yeah.
Can I just ask you, Warren, when you spoke about your dad's reaction, I wasn't sure, did he just, was that okay, yeah, are you staying for your tea, was that because he just accepted it, did he know already, or he just refused to engage with that?
It's a really good question.
Of all three.
It's a really good question, and if you ever meet my dad, you'd be like, ooh. I genuinely think that at the time it was something that he couldn't process. You know, he you know, he's of a generation where those sort of things we don't talk about. So I think at the time he understood what I was saying, but that was the conversation over. That is no longer up for discussion. We love you for who you are, but at this moment in time, that your sexual orientation isn't something we're going to discuss. You know, and you know, and we're looking, you know, and I am, yeah, and I think, you know, when we talk about inclusion, you know, I have to accept that my dad comes from a very different generation. You know, my dad left school at 14 and went to work down the pit. You know, his level of education, his level of literacy, is not the same as me and my brother. You know, so I accept my dad for who he is. You know, if he's homophobic or racist, of course, you know, I'm going to challenge that. But ultimately, he has accepted me for who I am. So I have to accept and love him for who he is. You know, I'm really lucky. Yeah, I'm really, you know, my dad, you know, it's a very good quote from one of my colleagues that's from up north. You know, my dad is as rough as toast, you know, and I love that man, you know, regardless of other things. You know, he loves me indefinitely, and I'm so lucky because he has accepted me, and I have a jibe at my brother, because when I qualified as a district nurse, so not only have I got my undergraduate degree on the wall, I've now got my postgrad on the wall. So in the so you know, in the dining room is 4 pictures of me on the wall, pride of place. So my dad doesn't necessarily tells me that he loves me, but I know he does, because he helps me look after my dogs. He helps me, you know, do some gardening. You know, he'll come and do some painting. You know, he'll pick me up from Derby when I've been out drinking with my friends. You know, he's a very different generation, you know, and I think when I look back now, at the time, it was probably very difficult for him to hear that. You know, he probably had a very different life plan for what I was going to turn out to be. However, you know, with his love and support, you know, I've managed to thrive. You know, I did my degree, I've done a post-grad, you know, recently I've started working at the University of Derby as a lecturer, you know, and that is all through the support of my friends and family, you know. So even though my dad is, you know, different to who I am, and we have a different value base, you know, he is nothing but lovely. I don't like the word partner, which is controversial to some people, but, you know, I've got a boyfriend who I've been, you know, we've been dating for about 7 months now, and my dad bought him a Christmas present. You know, we bought him an Easter present. So to me, that is acceptance, just like my dad buys my brother's now wife. They were together a long time before they got married, like over 20 years, and he does the same for her. So I know that my dad is accepting. Has it taken him 22 years to get there? Maybe, but he is ultimately accepting of me and who I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is difficult, and, you know, my story won't be undifferent to other people of my generation. You know, some people had it harder than me, some people probably had it better than me, some people are probably indifferent about the relationship with their parents. But I know for a fact that I would not be sat here talking to you and doing this podcast without the support of my parents and family.
Yeah. Yeah. When did you start working for the NHS, Warren, and what was it like for the LGBTQIA plus community then?
Oh, well, so I start, like I said earlier, I started my nurse training when I was 19, but actually I think now when I look back, I was probably a lot of internal homophobia, and actually at the time we didn't have a word for that. I just didn't like who I was. I didn't like how I sounded. I didn't like how I acted. I didn't like that I was perceived by some people as too thin, or, you know. So actually I look back now, and that is, you know, that is what I would call it. So I started for the NHS when I was 19. So in June this year, I'll have worked for the NHS for 20 years. So I started as an A grade at Derby hospitals. And so we're going back to 2004. When I first started as an A grade, and then, so people that don't know what an A grade is, that is before Agenda for Change, and that would now be a Band 2 healthcare assistant. So I've been around quite some time, and actually there was quite a lot. I look back now and I think, oh God, there was quite a lot of homophobic abuse, you know, patients saying derogatory slants and giving you a side eye, and I think, you know, I've been very lucky in my career. I've had some really very supportive managers and colleagues, and when I was thinking about this question, actually, there is one that springs to mind. And the ward that I used to work on was an old Nightingale ward. And I remember one of the patients being really nasty to me, and saying like, "Oh, don't you touch me, you dirty queer." You know, and you know, and absolutely horrible. And he meant it as a derogatory. Obviously, we've taken back the word, and it's more of an empowering word, and people use it to describe themselves. But, you know, 20 years ago, it was not an empowering word. It was derogatory, and he absolutely meant it. And I remember the ward manager getting up from a chair and going over and saying to him, "You do not speak to my staff like that, and you will apologise." And he said, "I will not apologise to him. Look at him," you know. And she dealt with it in a really good way. That, to be fair, there have been other bumps in the road, but to me, that is the one that sticks in my mind a lot. And I think, you know, we've come on a lot from that. But again, you know, not that it's a justification for his behaviour, but he was unwell. You know, it's a generational thing. You know, and that ward manager became a really good friend, and she was an absolutely amazing nurse, and she pushed me to become who I am. And, you know, I was forever in her office for saying something or doing something, or what, you know, when I was like in my early 20s, because I've got quite a fast mouth. You know, I've learned to tone it back as I get to 40. But through her support, she helped me believe in myself and believe that actually I could go back to university and do my training again. And so I worked as a band 2, band 3 and a band 4 in the acute trust, and then went to do my nurse training when I was 27. You know, but it is through support of her and other colleagues that I worked with for sort of like 6-7 years. You know, oh, you know, come on, get yourself back to university. You know, you're wasted as a healthcare. You know, there are opportunities out there. So I was really lucky that she was my ward manager for a sustained period of time, like for the whole 7 years, to be fair. You know, and even now, you know, we don't see each other because of life gets in the way, but you know, we exchange Christmas cards and the odd email, and she, you know, and she, to me, you know, like everybody, people didn't like her, some people did, you know, whatever your own personal, but to me, she was inspirational. You know, I wrote her a letter at Christmas, you know, and she wrote me a beautiful letter back, and I'm not a crier, but I did have a little tear in my eye, and I thought, even 22 years later, you know, this woman still believes in me and is proud of the achievements that I've achieved, even when sometimes I feel that she probably wanted to throttle me. Which I
I'm
couldn't
glad
blame,
you.
which I couldn't blame her, to be fair, because I was quite gobby. And I probably still am for some people, but yeah, you know, she was absolutely inspirational, and a few of the other senior staff nurses that I used to work with. And I was talking to some students that I was teaching last week, and I said, you know, I still aspire to be this nurse, but I will never be her, because I have to be my own authentic self. I try and channel her, but I have to be who I am. So yeah, so I've worked, you know, I've worked for the NHS for some time now. Yeah. And, you know, and I think, you know, I think since, like I say, since I came to DCHS, which is just over 4 years now, you know, I've never been so supported, as part of, you know, equality and stuff. And you know, and I'm proud to tell people that I work for DCHS, and some of the stuff that we are doing in the organisation, because it's really quite important to help with health inequality. So yeah.
That's really heartening to hear about DCHS. I'm wondering, is there anything that you can share with colleagues about how we can all help to make our workplaces and our communities in general more inclusive?
It's a really difficult question, that is, because everybody, if you part, you know, whatever part of the, you know, we're all part of a different community, if that be family or a staff network or a profession. But I think it's about having those honest and open conversations with people about, you know, you may be different, you may look different, you may act different, you may not look different at all, but actually you are, for whatever reason. And I think it's about asking the person, you know, as a colleague, as a manager, you know, as a leader, what can I do to include you? Like, I am quite open about it now, and wasn't before, but as part of my postgrad, I got diagnosed as dyslexic. I've known it most of my life, but I've just built in a lot of coping strategies to be able to do my job and do my job well. But, you know, I'm open, I'm open about that now. I'm open about that with staff. You know, some of my spelling's a bit off. Some of my, well, certainly my grammar and syntax is certainly off in my clinical notes. But I remember when I'd moved, I was in a core team and I'd moved to a different part of the organisation. But I remember saying to my new line manager, and she went, yeah, okay. Well, what can I do to help you? And actually, I said, well, I don't need you to do anything. And she was like, laughing. And she's like, well, why are you telling me? I said, well, I'm telling you because you need to know, you know. And I think, I'm very open about being gay. A lot of people may not be at that point in their life. And I think it's about asking people, what can I do? Is there anything we can do to make you include? And I think that actually goes a long way. And I think managers need to have those honest, open conversations, and actually they need to be open to what feedback the staff give, even if that has a negative connotation on them as a manager. But at the end of the day, I became a nurse to help people, and I want to do the best that I can do. And say, but to do that, my line manager needs to understand who I am as an individual. Some people might not want to disclose a sexual orientation or, neurodivergence, but actually it's about being able to articulate those conversations and say, oh, actually, what does this mean in the LGBTQIA plus? I wear a name badge with my pronouns on. I've never done that before, but I do because it's important for people who may have different pronouns but don't feel able to say that. And it's also important for inclusivity of other people. If you see me with a lapel badge on that says my pronouns, you're more likely to say to me, oh, actually, I don't like to be called she and that. I don't want to be called she and her. I want to be called they and them. So I think, that's, things like that are important. And I'm not saying at all, that I get it right, even being part of the network, I volunteer with a youth group, and some of the things they say, I have no idea because I'm old. I'm going through episodes of NCIS on Disney Plus. They talk about video games that I have to Google because I have no idea. It's a different generation where, I said about, queer being derogatory, they use it as part of their identity. Where when they first started using it, it used to make me a bit twitchy because I used to think, oh, I used to get called that in the playground and it wasn't kind. When now we've been empowered to take the word back. And I think that's the difference. And I think, things have changed a lot in the last 20 years. But we've certainly, things haven't stopped. And it's about being honest and open, I think, is what I can say. And if you don't understand something, it's about asking the staff member, well, what does that mean? Or could you explain a little bit more about that to me so I can understand for my own learning and development?
Yeah. That is a really fascinating insight. Thank you so much. If anybody wants to get in touch with you as a gay advocate for DCHS, how can they make contact?
So my contact details, I believe, are on the intranet if you go to the LGBTQIA network. Otherwise, you can just search me. So my email is warren.gregory1@nhs.net. But my normal working days for DCHS are only Monday and Tuesday. So if you drop me an email, I will respond. But obviously, I only work 2 days clinically at the moment.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Warren. It was good to talk.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you so much for having me.